Hi, my name is David Jackson, and I'm here with Hypatia Math Ed, and I would like to talk to you about the decimal system. Now, what is the problem with the decimal system? Nothing. But there's a problem with the way we teach it, and a problem that the students are encountering in their trajectory through school. Most people, if you ask them what decimal is about, ask them to explain it, they couldn't tell you. Try it. Try asking people if you have any understanding of decimal. Ask them, do a survey, stop them on the street, make a video, whatever. Ask them, what's decimal about? Explain decimal system. Most probably couldn't tell you, even though they're functioning human beings. They're, maybe successful. What's going on? Why is that the case? Why are people coming out of school after having studied decimal system for, the entire experience of school, from K through 12, they're dealing with decimal system. What's going on? Why are they coming out with such a weak or lack of understanding? Well, there's no comparison. And without comparison, there's no understanding. So I'm here to present to you a new way of numbering that is related to decimal, although it won't seem so in the first place, but it provides some comparison to then deepen the understanding. I tried this with my daughter, and I found that by not focusing on decimal, but by focusing on this larger idea, she just started picking up decimal, and I hadn't really taught her anything about I hadn't pushed her to memorize decimal facts. I hadn't dwelled on decimal facts, but she just kind of naturally plucked it out of that context and started using it on her own, and it shocked me. Okay. So in a matter of just a few weeks, without having dwelled on and drilled in decimal facts like most teachers do for several years of school, she just kind of picked it up. So let's begin. So this idea, or this new system, comes from a website that I found. Oh, I can't remember the name of the website. I'll get to you later about that. But I was searching for some other systems of numeration, and I came across something that I like to call Old English sheep counting. Now, what on earth is that? Well, it's this idea that you can imagine shepherds in medieval England were illiterate, innumerate. They couldn't do math. They couldn't read or write, really, although I'm sure that wasn't necessarily true all the way across the board, but for the most part. And the kings at the time wanted to, tax sheep holdings, and they'd have to send out accountants to count the sheep. Well, the accountants realized, well, these shepherds can't read or write or do math, so how am I going to get them to help me count all these sheep? So the idea was to do the following. Now, I don't have sheep, I'm not a shepherd, but I can use cubes. So you can imagine parents and teachers, you could get this going on in the classroom. So let's just say, this handful of cubes I've got here, I got some unknown number of sheep in my hands. Oops. Some of them just fell to their deaths. But I got some unknown number of sheep in my hands. The cubes represent the sheep. Okay, and they're in pasture. So the idea is to bring them out of pasture and then separate them into two pens. So you bring them into a corral and you separate them into two pens in the corral. And you just do that as kind of a rather tedious process. And so we just take the sheep one by one, or two by two rather, pairs. So there's a pair. There's another pair. I'm just placing them in bowls until I've exhausted the set of sheep. And so the shepherd would instruct I'm sorry, the accountant, the king sent, would instruct the shepherd to bring the sheep from pasture and then separate them pairs at a time into the 2 pens in the corral. So, do this for a moment. And then when you get toward the end, you're left with either no sheep, I'm left with no sheep, or you're left with 1 sheep. So what do you do? Okay, I'm left with no sheep. So where did I put my chalk? Here we go. So you record the remainders, because you're just dividing by 2, essentially. You record the remainders from right to left. And so my first remainder was a 0. Okay, so now, if you had if you had 1 sheep, you're going to send that remaining sheep out to pasture, and one of the pens containing sheep, just this bowl, you're going to send that half of the sheep back out to pasture, and you're going to repeat this process with the remaining pen of sheep. So I had no sheep left over. I'm going to send nothing out to pasture. Then I've got this pen of sheep. I'm going to send them back out to pasture, so they'll just go back in my tub of cubes. And now I have this bowl of sheep, cubes. Now I'm going to repeat this process. So I'm going to go through this again. And again, this is rather tedious. So while I'm doing this, you can ponder the meaning of my t-shirt here. My password is the last 8 digits of pi. So feel free to comment on that shirt if you have any thoughts on it. I wonder how many of you have already figured out what's going to happen here, or at least what kind of system this is going to happen to be. Okay, so I ended up with a remainder of 1 sheep, so that sheep's going to go back out to pasture, and then I'm going to send 1 pen out to pasture. I leave 1 pen of sheep to repeat the process with, and I record a 1 to the left of that 0. Okay, so now I take the sheep that remain in the pen, do it again. And I have no sheep remaining, so I record a 0. Send that pen out to pasture, start again with the remaining pen. I wonder what the accountant is doing while he stands around waiting for the shepherd to complete this process. Okay, so again, no sheep, so I record a 0. 1 pen out to pasture. Repeat the process with the remaining sheep. Again, no sheep remaining. So pen goes out to pasture. Do the process again. no sheep remaining. Send one out to pasture. And I have one sheep left in the pen, so that finishes off the problem. So this is the record of the number of sheep that this shepherd actually has control of. So then, what is this? What is the meaning of this? This is a very unusual way to number things. So I'm going to leave you with trying to figure out, this is clearly not decimal, if you know anything about decimal. This is clearly not a decimal number, a decimal representation of the number of sheep that the shepherd had. So the question I leave with you is, what is this in decimal? Okay, you might be tempted to call this a million, wait, what would that be? That would be 10, no, that would be 1,000,010. You might be tempted to call that 1,000,010 sheep, but clearly that would be absurd. The shepherd would not have 1,000,010 sheep, and this is not a decimal representation. So, what is its decimal? So here we have a system that is completely different, or at least seems completely different than decimal, but it provides a very nice comparison. The only comparison, or rather, the only comparison I've ever heard of, you may not have ever even thought of any comparison to decimal, but here you have a system that allows for comparison and will end up turning into a more general idea based on decimal. So I'll leave you with that. Please give me some comments about what this is in decimal, what you think this system is, and whatever else you think pertains to this discussion. Thank you.